Are you a business owner looking for real advice and input? You're in the right place. From concept to launch to growth, funding, and beyond. Welcome to Startup Hustle with your hosts. One once sold a business for $150 million. The other, the author of $1 Million Bedroom. Here are your hosts of Startup Hustle, Matt DeCoursey and Matt Watson.
1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. 'Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it.
And we're back. Another episode of Startup Hustle. Matt DeCoursey here with Matt Watson. Hi, Matt.
What's going on, man?
Just doing a little more queue time today, baby. Just trying to another day on the Startup Hustle virtual recording studio, and lots of stuff to talk about. With us today, we have Alicia Karlin, who is the VP of Global Touring and Talent for AEG Presents. Good morning, Alicia.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. And, we've had a lot of discussion about live events and tours and done a lot of different stuff. And obviously I think everyone's well aware of the situation with sports and live events. And I thought we could take a different direction today and talk about, from an entrepreneur standpoint, some of the hustle that is required to make these events happen, which obviously are now paused, but the events that are now on pause, you were planning quite a long time ago, right?
Yeah, the events, all events have a long lead cycle for the most part, especially music festivals and larger scale events. So most of our things are 365 enterprises.
That, I think one of the things, and before we get too far into this, today's episode of Startup Hustle is brought to you by Fullscale.io, helping you build a software team quickly and affordably. Well, I think from the host and co-host standpoint, I mean, Matt and I have a history in the music industry and ticketing and some stuff like that, more so over the last few years as an attendee. One of the things, and we were talking about this before we hit record, Fullscale has a suite at our local venue. And one of the things that's always kind of interesting is after a show ends, everyone else leaves the venue, but the suite's still open for an hour and you get to watch the army of people come in and deconstruct. And that's just a small part of everything that goes in. One of the things that you have participated in over the years is the Electric Forest Festival. That's what it's called, right?
That's correct. Yep. Electric Forest.
And that's been an ongoing annual festival for a while. As far as those kind of festivals, the festival kind of, in general, really started to boom again about 10, 15 years ago? Is that?
So Electric Forest was launched in 2011. It came after the Rothbury Festival, which was its predecessor on the same site. The Rothbury Festival is kind of like a legendary event in 2008 and 2009. And then we all know what happened around that time, but music festivals in this country kind of, paused a bit. A lot of the festival market contracted after 2008, and then took a couple years to come back. And then we rebranded and relaunched with new partners, which are Insomniac Events and Madison House Presents relaunched Electric Forest together in 2011 with a new direction on the same grounds.
So if you want to start a music festival, I mean, how does that even? I mean, obviously you got to have the idea for it, but where do you even start? Like you said, the Rothbury Festival, and using those same grounds. But I mean, how does from an entrepreneur? I mean, you have to look. I guess any new festival is a startup. So how do you have a music festival startup?
Well, I think first of all, you should be in the music business, right? Step
Probably
one.
Good advice. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that they can, start a festival because I have a farm or this, or I know a place. But you need a lot more than a venue. You need to have, deep relationships with the people in operations and ticketing, and fans that trust you, and artist teams that trust you as well. So, I think that that's kind of step one. I've been at Madison House Presents for, which is a division of AEG, for going on 15 years. And they specialized in boutique events and festivals that were really built around specific artists and their vision, and a deep community vibe to them. So with the string cheese incident that came, they had annual events in Oregon at a place called Horning's Hideout. And we did lots of festivals at that location, and the Big Summer Classic tour and festival. So there's a long history of working with a lot of artists. Number two, you do obviously need to have a venue that makes sense, especially for a festival. If you're going to be doing a camping festival in particular, there aren't as many of those in the US. They're really all over the place in Europe, and they have a way longer history with camping festivals than we do in America. Bonnaroo was kind of in 2002, right? That's when they launched, but that was kind of the rebirth of the large scale camping festival in America. So it's a rather new proposition in terms of where we're at in music history here in America. So those are just a couple of the first items that you need.
Matt, what's a music festival that you've been to?
I've never been to one.
What?
No.
Not even the local.
Yeah,
not even like Ford Fest or Lollapalooza or when it toured or anything like that.
I think I think the closest thing I've ever been to is like a all day concert, like Red, White, and Boom. I think that's not really a music festival, right?
Well, that's actually a good point. Let's define what a music festival is, because I think that might have a different definition. I think a music festival. Should I take a stab at it, or what?
I'm
Matt,
not going to define it.
Right, Matt. What do you define a music festival as?
I think it's got to be more than one stage and potentially more than one day.
I don't know if it has to be more than one day, but maybe
more than one stage.
Yeah, I think more. I would
Telluride Bluegrass.
Multiple performers. Multiple performers throughout at least one entire day.
So more than say like 4 performers, because like any show could have like 3 opening acts or whatever. So it's got to be more than that.
I don't know.
I'll go with more than 4 performers on a stage at a place.
I do kind of like the multi-stage definition. I know you said like the Telluride Festival.
There are a lot of iconic festivals though that just run on one, but are maybe multi-day.
Right. Well, then there you go.
And festivals are usually a destination that people travel to, right? They're not necessarily that just the locals go to.
Again, I mean, it's just really they come in all shapes and sizes.
I say that because I feel like there's not a lot of music festivals in Kansas City, and so maybe that's why I've never really been to any.
True. There used to be one in outside of Lawrence called Wakarusa.
Yep.
That was important in the jam band festival scene for sure.
Well, so we have like Red, White, and Boom every year, which is like a kind of top 40 music, right? And then we have Rock Fest every year. So maybe those are
still music festivals. I think
Rock
that
Fest would be a clue.
Yeah. There you go. But I think that they do a lot of these on different scales too. And Matt, you said that there aren't a lot in Kansas City. There actually are quite a few. I think a lot of them are just very, very niche. They're not promoted as heavily as some of these mega fests. So,
I think the Christian music ones. Do those count?
Sure.
There's some of those too.
I don't think the genre matters actually. Yeah. And then I think one of the things that I think that all right. So I'll tell you, I have gone to a ton of live music in my life, but I haven't been a huge festival person. And there's a few reasons why. I mean, sometimes it's the the hustle and bustle, the time in between artists and acts that it sometimes takes to get them set up. And I think that that's gotten a little better over time. And then I just kind of like to, so I'll give you an example. Alicia and I know each other through Joel Cummins, my co-author of The Realist Guide to a Successful Music Career and the keyboardist in Humphreys McGee. I like to just hear those guys play for like 3 hours. And in some music festivals, you get these smaller doses and you get a lot of different things. Now, on the flip side of that, I like the new music and the eclectic nature of festivals as well, possibly seeing a whole bunch of people. But yeah, it's, as far as the camping fests, I think now that I'm in my mid 40s, those haven't felt as appealing as they might have 20 years ago.
They definitely, when you're talking about, mass camping, tend to skew younger for obvious reasons. But, there's options for everyone, at a lot of the bigger festivals for, more creature comforts, as you get older.
Well, I just heard about this thing called the Fire Fest, and I booked my ticket. I'm really excited for it. I spent like an extra $5,000, and I'm doing some VIP package or something.
Dude, get the villa. Get the villa.
Yeah,
you want a villa.
I'm going all out, so I'll let you know how it goes.
Dude, you can afford it. You go all in, get the plane, get the villa, and make sure you load your wristband up with a ton of virtual cash.
There's like a special yacht to come get me and like all this stuff. Yeah. So
yeah, I'll be on it. I'll be waiting for you.
I was wondering what first event for you.
So, well, we can start there because one of the things that, I think a lot of people had maybe heard of the Fire Fest. I think more people have heard of it now for what a disaster and and it's really going to probably be the prime example of poor event planning and for a long time. But, I've watched that documentary a couple times and I find it to be really fascinating because as an entrepreneur and a startup founder, it was clearly not well thought out. There weren't, one of the things that we always tell people when we talk to them about their, people say, oh, I'll have this done in 6 months. Oh, so you mean a year? And these things take a lot longer. And I'd like to go back in the timeline of planning because I don't think that most people listening understand how far ahead you have to book some of these acts and start reserving their time. And Alicia, you have a pretty significant history working as a booking agent and a talent buyer. So can we talk a little bit about like that whole process? Because I think it's really fascinating. I think a lot of people don't understand how much capital, time, effort, planning, and logistics go into all that.
Sure. So, as we've gotten, the timeline kind of ebbs and flows. About 10 years ago, it was not as far out as it is now. Right now, it can be anywhere from, 18 months to 8 months, something in that range for the larger festivals in advance. And I would say it used to be more like 6 to 9 months, and things are contracting a bit again. I've noticed in the past couple of years because that super long lead time that everyone was planning around has changed a little bit. But I would say if you're talking about 8 months in advance is when you start really booking for the next event, and that's a lot of artists, that you're dealing with, negotiating with, trying to route. In my case on Electric Forest, a lot of people coming from Europe, they're planning their entire year, a lot of times 2-year kind of segments, when they're going to be in different parts of the world, at least when you're talking about internationally touring acts. So they know that they're going to be in Europe in these 2 months, in Australia for these months, maybe in Asia, and then a lot of them know at least a year in advance, if not more, when they're going to be touring in the US. So that's one thing. Also, the summer festivals in Europe are a factor for a lot of our events here in America and festivals. And people, decide that one year they're going to be in America in June, and the next year they're going to be in Europe in June and July. So you knowing that in advance, even 2 years in advance, when you're going to have the next chance at somebody that they're going to be here is important. So again, just kind of being in the mix and having those relationships as a talent buyer with the artist side and the agents, you can really get a better sense of what's going to be available. So you're not, kind of shooting blind or sending offers for things and wasting time that are never going to pan out.
So when it comes to budgeting or planning for a festival, one of the unknowns is obviously advanced ticket sales, and how do you make any determination as to whether or not an act that you're booking is gonna fill seats?
Well, that's a the $1 million question. But a lot of it is track your own track record, your own gut, your own instincts about something, and also there's so much data now that you're able to kind of really critically look at things as well. Streaming and other ticket sales patterns and radio play, um, demand, social following. You kind of have to look at all of them, and no one metric really is going to determine that. But if you're a good talent buyer and you have experience, you're gonna probably take a lot of bets, and the good ones make good bets more often than not. So it's really just like having a pretty good understanding of the landscape, I think.
There's one thing that I've already found in common with Matt Watson and music festivals is I usually have to book his time at least 8 months in advance as well. So, and
Right.
his rider is incredible. At one point, when we finally made it onto the charts for the podcast, Matt's demands went up. He needed a tour bus. He wanted a live, what was it, a seahorse and 4 pounds of what was it, green M&Ms.
Yeah, don't forget my M&Ms.
So, one of the for those of you listening while you're in quarantine, an interesting thing that you might to entertain yourself is look up concert riders. Now, a rider are some of the things that an act will require, and some when backstage or however they want things. Some artists are known for being particularly complicated, and then others are remarkably easy to deal with. In a festival setting, how do you coordinate all of the activity that goes on behind the stage? Because just from a preparation standpoint and all that other stuff, how do you go about even giving any consideration to that?
Well, we have thousands of people that work on Electric Forest, for example, and each department. There's artist transportation, there's artist relations, there's artist hospitality. Each of those departments is kind of staffed with their own small army of people running that specific department. We have fueling, we have site ops, we have production, stage hands. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Lighting crews, sound crews, techs. So it really is a massive amount of coordination that is what goes into this year of planning. As soon as the festival ends, everybody takes a little sigh, a little break, maybe a week or two, and then gets right back at it for the next year to make sure that those things are all accounted for. Artist hospitality is a super important department, because like you're saying, the riders and a lot of people do make fun of those riders or the items that are on it, but for the most part those are just things that you would want as a touring musician so that you can live a normal life and eat healthy and have the things that you like while you're touring from city to city. The mass majority of those things are pretty standard, pretty normal. Fruit and peanut butter and jelly and some turkey sandwiches, and Gatorade. So you do have to take into consideration that you're dealing with people touring around the world, and they just want to eat what they want to eat. At a festival setting, we have catering, and the riders are more limited to some key items outside of the headliners, but pretty much I would say more or less you don't encounter too much of the crazy requests. There's always a few.
Yeah, I think you had a really good point there. So, in my first book, Balance Me, which I interviewed Joel Cummins for, part of why I thought he would be it's such an interesting interview for the book about finding some balance in your life was how do you do that when you're on the road so much? And I had when I worked for Roland, I had, I was traveling 180 days a year, and like you said, that sense of normalcy can start to disappear, and it's really easy to throw your healthy habits out the window because you're busy and you're doing a lot of stuff. In regards to so Humphreys McGee, as I've been around a lot of artists, and I'm sure not as many as you, Alicia, but those guys are very professional, and they stick to a very strict timeline and keep things moving the way that they need to. And the moment that starts to break down, it becomes a problem, everywhere. You're talking about an artist that, on average, probably plays for 3,000 people a night. And they have a couple semi trucks full of equipment that needs to be somewhere else and set up ready to go 24 hours later. And all of that is such a precise operation that I don't think I could do it. Honestly, I think I would fail miserably at it. I was talking to Robbie Williams, their road manager, and I'm like, how do you not forget half your shit at every single event? He was like, every single box, every single tub, every single crate, we know exactly what goes in it. It's numbered, it's labeled, we put them on the truck in a specific order. And despite all that, I've actually asked the members of the band at one point, I'm like, what's the worst thing you've left behind at a venue? And it was Jake Seninger actually told me, my guitar. So yeah, that's kind of important, but I
can't imagine the logistics of that. Like, that is so against my personality in every way, shape, or form to organize that. So
yeah, the road crew is imperative. They know exactly how they load the truck like Tetris, and they know exactly how it goes. And at
Tetris
every
is
venue,
a great example. Yeah.
At every venue, they're working with a different crew on the ground of stagehands. So they have to direct traffic every day with a new set of people.
I would think it would be a lot harder for a festival because it's not like you're on tour with Madonna and she does the same damn thing every night or every other night, right? Like a festival, it's all sort of one-time thing. It's sort of a different setup.
There's definitely a lot of gear, a lot of gear, a lot of different vendors. And so, it takes a lot of advanced preparation, a lot of organization by all of the teams to know what goes where, when, even for a specific act, you can say, to play on the stage at 5 p.m. That transition between one act to the next act, you have to think about the work that went into planning just that transition and what size risers are going to be on the stage, how many, what specific backline gear goes for the next person. So that's all advanced planned so that it looks like, oh, those guys just slid that drum right up there and those keyboards. But, they had to know what make and model, what size, what power, supply, all of the things to make sure that one act goes on and one act goes on, off and on, and the band walks on and all their stuff is there just as it should be. That's a lot of people.
Actually, a festival is probably easier because they don't have a custom stage to move around. It's just the band and the band's equipment, not the stage.
No.
I want to speak to that because having worked in the musical instrument industry for 8 years, dude, you use the word Tetris for loading the truck. Tetris would be easy compared to plugging 10 different types of everything into everything else. And then the thing is too, is it's all running into a soundboard and the amount, it's kind of like trying to match two non-matching types of code like .NET and PHP. Like they just don't jive well together.
My point is, at least you don't have 30 semi-trailers of stage shit to move to.
I think you have 30. You have to have 30 semis from all the different artists with their shit that they show because they're still showing up with their stuff. That's it. That truck is loaded and ready to go wherever it is they're going, whether it's a festival or anything else. I think they still show up with a relatively similar amount of gear. And the reason for that is like, okay, so
the next day they're going somewhere else.
Cables go bad, pedals break. So here, I'll give you an example. Most people don't think about this. So once again, I worked for Roland, the world's largest maker of electronic musical instruments. So many things are digital and electronic, and all those components are held together with tiny little drops of solder. And those guitar pedals, keyboards, everything, they're getting shoved into cases. They're riding in trucks. They're bouncing up and down. They're getting dropped and stuff like that. And sometimes you just don't have a good connection. You go to plug in a guitar and it just squeals and stuff like that. And you have to have all that extra crap with you. So Joel travels with a Hammond organ, which his road crew probably hates him for that. Joel actually has a second Hammond organ at home that exists strictly for parts, and it's just like weird stuff like that. And when it comes to, most artists are very particular about their sound, their gear, their setup, and they don't want to be up on stage wrestling with bad anything. And I would imagine from an artist relations standpoint, nothing will piss them off faster than you accidentally making them sound like crap on stage. Is that true?
Sure. A lot of them are traveling with their own gear and their own crew, right? So, they're used to dealing with things like that. As you said, things short out, you're dealing with gear. And so the magic of that is, having your crew that knows how to fix your stuff, or that is used to dealing with the particulars of your issues that come along with whatever your pedal setup is, or if you have a complicated rig. But yeah, no one wants to sound bad in the middle of a show. That's for sure, because the audience, blames it on the artist.
Yeah, sure. And also, it's the same way with giving a speech or teaching or doing anything else. If you're distracted by something that takes you off of your game, it's hard to do what you need to do. It's not easy. So if as we're hypothetically planning our fictional festival here, what's something that I would likely not think of without experience when it came to planning a festival that would be critical to it occurring? Like with Fire Festival, they just didn't have enough time to get permits and build stuff and things like that.
That's one. They had poor weather plans. Clearly, they didn't have safety. Is really the number one thing when you're planning all of the elements that go around that. It's not just weather, but it's all kind of safety measures, exits, and having things planned that can play over the speakers in any type of emergency, different messaging that you can get out to the masses quickly, as well as something that you wouldn't think of. I don't know how to make sure there's enough fuel on site to power all the vehicles that you're running, or the generators, or the golf carts, or all of the things that run on fuel. Making sure that that's a major piece of the puzzle for any festival. Heavy equipment. How do you plan your heavy equipment needs? Making sure that you don't have too much heavy equipment on site, but also that you don't have, so things aren't just laying around, tons of forklifts sitting around because everybody needed one, but coordinating that effort so that everybody gets it when they need it, and you are maximizing the time with all of that equipment, and not having too much or too little. It's a real sweet spot.
What about permits and ordinance and stuff like that? How big is that? Easy, or is that a giant pain?
I think it depends on where you are and what municipalities you're working under. Every single place is going to be different. As we know, in this country, nothing is standardized state to state, which is, sometimes good and sometimes not so good. It would be great if you just had to go to the permit office, take your ticket, wait in line, and be out. But everywhere is different. Whether you're in a rural community or an urban community, the rules are going to be all over the place, and really being able to navigate that, and having legal teams and all of those, and community relations is super important, because a lot of times you are going into a community and becoming part of it in some way, whether they want you there or they don't want you there. Every single festival is going to deal with a different set of circumstances.
I think I've already realized that I would be a terrible festival planner. I may have crossed that off my future startups. I mean, I would imagine that the attention to detail is probably mind numbing. Just from you talk about just being able to just not doing one simple thing could, backlog 900 other things. I mean, I think that's the same in a lot of different businesses. So, now, as far as like capital requirements, that's got to be big. I mean, because are you typically paying artists ahead of time? Does that occur after? Or, how does that work along with, and maybe even speak to things like being prepared to potentially give refunds?
Every artist gets a deposit. And really, the size of that deposit and how far in advance you pay that deposit depends a lot upon how well capitalized your company is. Say that.
So like AEG and Live Nation are the larger, are the big kids.
And
so you're not worried about them, right? Right. Okay.
Correct. And there's standard deposit terms with those companies because they don't have a history of stiffing artists, right? The artist knows they play the show with those entities, they're going to get paid. Especially if you're just starting out, you're probably paying 50 to 100% in advance. For the larger promoters, that's not the case. You're paying, upon completion of the performance for the majority of the fee. So, capital is extremely important. If you're starting out, all of your vendors are going to be requiring various levels of deposits just along that same scale as the artist. And really, that's where that experience and trust and longevity plays into, your cash flow.
So obviously cash flow is the lifeblood of any business. Now that we, let's just say we planned this and we did well, we were well capitalized, we got all our permits in place, we let Matt set up all the equipment, so it's just dialed in exactly where it needs to be. Matt, you know how to tune a guitar, right?
No.
Yeah.
I know how to play the harmonica though.
Nice.
We all do, man. Yeah. By the way, that's on my list of what I call tolerance instruments, meaning everyone has a very finite tolerance. Like the kazoo, oboes, banjos are also on that list for me. So now the day of the show arrives, and we talked about cash flow. So obviously you have advanced ticket sales. Is that the major portion of the revenue, or is it the vending and other stuff that goes on at the actual event?
That all plays into it. And again, it depends on the size of your event, right? And what some music festivals don't have as many vendors or some have a lot. Food and beverage is obviously a big piece of sales and on-site, especially if people are camping, right? They're eating there, they're drinking there, they're sleeping there. So you have to provide, outside of just necessity, people are staying in places for days. You want to provide them with great food and beverage options. So that's a big piece of it. But ticket sales are always, the bulk of your revenue, I would say, in these circumstances. And sorry, what was it? What was this part 2 of that question?
Oh, I was just, as far as like, I was up late last night improving our own business plan. And, there's so many, detailed line items that can, everything from parking to tickets to, and then, one of the things that, I think a lot of people don't understand or wrap their arms around is the price of actually promoting the event
is insanely high. Right. You have to think about all the things that we've already covered, but tons of line items that we haven't even covered either too. There's thousands upon thousands of line items of expenses in a festival. It's a very expensive business to go into, to start up.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that a lot of people, I think they don't consider is like right now we've got, a lot of postponement of different events. There was probably a hell of a lot of promotion that went into that.
Yeah,
And
marketing.
yeah, well, those become
Those dollars are lost, right?
yeah, that's sunk costs at this point, and those are gone. And so you've been doing this for 15 years. How have you seen the landscape or the expense structure change around marketing? Like, what was, because 15 years ago, if people don't think about this, 15 years ago was the iPhone even out then?
I don't think so.
iPhone
No,
came out
but there
around, I think,
definitely wasn't,
2007. Yeah.
there
Yeah.
wasn't Facebook and Instagram advertising wasn't a thing then, right? You were still using your kind of straightforward platforms. You were definitely advertising digitally, but not at the scale that we're advertising digitally now. There wasn't any targeting at that point. There wasn't sophisticated digital marketing. It was kind of like, how many people can you reach on this email blast or on this web banner? What's the reach on that website to place banners? I mean, that's where, when I started, that's what we were doing. Radio, print ads, street team, billboards, which are all still a key part of a marketing mix, depending on what you're promoting and who you're promoting it to. But the bulk of marketing for music these days is digitally and hyper targeted.
Yeah. So, and is that really the key now? Just really chasing down that metadata and knowing that someone has liked a page or searched something. And like you said, that targeted nature is that,
music is difficult because music is about a fan community, right? And so if you finding that community is essential, but a lot of times you still have to reach that in a media mix, because they're not all living in one place online together. That would make marketing rather easy, right? But that's not how it works. And most things, people want to hear from their friends that they trust that this is something that is worth going to because they heard about it. So you have to develop that over time.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier, like giving some consideration to what amount of tickets an act at a festival might draw. And obviously you mentioned some of the social media following. That's obviously kind of a built-in. Is that something that festivals negotiate, require, or ask of artists, that they do X amount of promotion, mention, or anything to their own fans or followers?
Yeah, that's definitely in the ask mix, depending on the artist. You would put different emphasis on that. Some artists are happy to do it and understand that that's part of like their own culture, of their own fan base online, is to want to talk about where they're playing. Other acts like to say that their social media is highly curated and they don't like to post about where they're playing, which is always a unique conversation to have. But yes, we definitely ask that the artists promote their performance.
As someone who considers himself a promoter of stuff, the idea that your social media was highly curated and you didn't want to mention where you were going to be or what you were doing seems a little odd.
For sure.
Matt, what's something about live music that you've learned either today or over the years that really surprised you, either about, like, I don't know, just anything about the whole live event business?
Surprised me.
Well, I'll let's start. Okay. You think about that. I'll ask Matt first.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that's a great question. I don't know.
I'm here to stump everyone while we're recording things live. Yeah, I think for myself, I think that, I mentioned I've had kind of an interesting glimpse. Working for Roland put me in front of a lot of interesting situations. And, like one of the things that, even though it's not a concert, it might as well be. I'm sure you've been to the NAMM convention. Yeah. Massive. So when I used to work for Roland, our booth was an acre. It was the size of a football field. Wow. And we had our own theater. and and within that, and just like seeing how much logistics go into shows or events that you as a participant or attendee might think, oh, this isn't that big of a show, and like, and 500 people is a lot of people to deal with.
Totally.
300 people is a lot of people to deal with. And then, the mechanics of
waiting in a line.
Right. Oh shit. Oh man, that's something. And that's going to be an interesting new dynamic for sports in general. I've been stuck in line. I remember, the Kansas City Chiefs have been in the postseason the last couple of years, and not this year, but the year before. My wife and I waited in line in 8-degree weather for 2 hours to get into a game, and we're literally running to our seats for kickoff. And it was probably, it threw so much salt on the flavor of the day. Just that frustrating feeling and stuff like that. And, that was just because of a simple change in the way that they wanted to check bags or do something on the way in. But it had this ripple effect. And some of the things that, I've seen over the years is, as ticketing transitioned to more digital formats, they've had some breakdowns at the door and different stuff. There was a Garth Brooks show somewhere in Tennessee or somewhere like that where they were 2 hours behind on letting people in. Like literally some people missed the whole show. And it had to do with the fact that it wasn't logistically planned, because everyone was relying on their phone to have an internet signal to bring up their ticket. And then all of a sudden, when you had 15,000 people there right next to the tower, it was overwhelmed and the scanners were broken or going slow and stuff like that. It's maybe rather than asking what surprised you, and you don't have to name names or throw anyone under the bus, but can we like to share an occasional story of failure? What's a failure that you've experienced or had to overcome or had to adapt to really quickly? And we'll let that be how we close our episode out today.
Okay. Well, I've been really lucky to work with some pretty amazing teams that have a lot of contingency plans. But, weather and Mother Nature, you really can't ever have, you can't know when that's going to kind of run its course. So I think, that to me is always the biggest thing of running a music festival is battling the weather, especially because we are in northwestern Michigan with Electric Forest, right up against Lake Michigan. The weather patterns there, they come in, they come out really quickly, really fast. So knowing those things is essential. So, we constantly have weather events and thunderstorms. And when you have lightning, you have to evacuate people, right? So I'll say, many, many times over the past 10 years, and especially recently, we have had to evacuate 50,000 people from a venue and then reschedule the night's events on the fly, coordinate with 50 artists to adjust their set times. Luckily, that goes back to these relationships, saying like, okay, we want to make sure everybody can play tonight that was on the schedule, and we were closed for 2 hours. So can you can we shorten this up? Can we talk to the stage crew, and instead of an hour between acts, can we make it 20 minutes? And having that team that knows how to work together and adapt, and then get 50,000 people back in and closing out the weekend is something that we had to do this past year at Electric Forest. And I would say those days are really trying, but when they happen and it's complete and it all works, those are definitely the most rewarding, and the team can like really celebrate together that all the planning is worth it, and having a dynamic of people that have worked together for a long time and can really trust each other to make those on the fly changes and execute them is the key.
Matt, have you been involved in a live event fail or something like that? I'll let you think about that for a second. I actually this was probably 8 or 9 years ago. When I lived in Indianapolis, I went to see Fish at Deer Creek, Noblesville, right there. And it was looking kind of stormy. They came out, played one song, and the heavens just opened up, and they cleared the whole venue. Go back to your cars, people. Now, we were in the pavilion and were able to stay for a while, but they literally, had to force everyone out and go back to your cars, and doing it in a torrential downpour. And like I said, I think they played one song, or maybe like part of one. It was not good timing as far as that. And I've also been at a Royals game where, with lightning, not only lightning, but they were afraid of tornadoes and lightning. In that case, we just beelined to the car and went home. We didn't wait that out. But Matt, have you been involved in anything like that?
I've definitely seen that at a couple soccer games where bad weather came in, but probably the biggest failure I've seen is our own podcast and trying to do it live.
Which time?
Yeah, that's been a disaster a few times. So,
are you referring to the ones where we've actually had a live audience, or just the daily?
The live streaming from our office has always been a challenge.
You have a good point, because I think a lot of people just don't understand like the kind of weird shit that can go wrong just even trying to have two people talk into a microphone and record. But Matt, that goes back to that point of trying to change the acts out and trying to do all this different stuff. It's like everyone knows in the actual podcast studio, don't touch Matt's dials.
No, you're right.
My levels, man. Nothing that'll drive me crazy. And then there's always like weird stuff. I remember when we had 2 episodes and we had a crackle. Had a freaking crackle, and it just was like occasionally, about every 30 seconds, you just hear a little crackle. And after troubleshooting that for about 4 hours, we literally took everything apart, put it back together, only to then come to the conclusion that because of the HD cameras, the live stream cameras that we had hooked up, we were overpowering the computer. So after literally going like nuts, and I was like, and here's the thing, a crackle's probably the worst thing you can get, because it's usually a connection or something weird, or like I said, like a solder joint. And I was about at the end of my rope with that. Well, once again, with us today, we had Alicia Karlin. If you want to learn more about Alicia, you can. She was featured in The Realist Guide to a Successful Music Career. Yes, thank you again for that. Thank you for that. That is actually a book that I have participated in writing that people actually read. So that's and I'm sure you're aware at one point that actually went to #1 on Amazon for a short period in the music category. So thank you for participating in that. That was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot of stuff. Might have to make a bit of an addendum or put a new chapter onto that real quick, but it's been a different world. So
the 2020 chapter.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, just like, hey, here's the rest of the shit that you didn't think about in advance. But yeah, this was really interesting. And once again, with this Alicia Karlin, that's with a K, the VP of Global Touring and Talent for AEG Presents, one of the brilliant and hardworking minds behind all of the cool live stuff that you like to go and see. Anyway, I'm gonna get back to planning my next festival, whenever that might be. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.